Hello and welcome to Tax Matters, coming to you from the venue of the 21st Annual Tax Conference organized by the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, CITN.
The crowd is huge, in fact unprecedented. In attendance are the creme de la creme of the tax industry and in fact the entire ecosystem of Nigeria.
The event began on Tuesday, the 23rd of April 2019 with an hospitality night, which featured presentations from different district societies.
And in the morning of Wednesday, the 24th of April, the conference hall of the NAF Conference Center in Kado, Abuja, came alive with the opening ceremony of the 21st edition of the yearly Intellectual Feast.
Come along as we take you on a step-by-step journey of the proceedings. The keynote address of President Muhammadu Buhari, who was the special guest of honor, was delivered by the Permanent Secretary, Federal Ministry of Finance, who stood in for the minister.
I commend the leadership and members of the CITN for your valued contributions to national development over the years. Your recommendations have always been welcome, and our expectations of the outcome of this current conference will be no different. The theme of this conference, Taxation and National Development, Unlocking the Potential of Taxation, is indeed apt and timely, as it is coming barely after the very successful general elections of 2019 that will usher us into the Fifth Republic. Nigeria's tax to GDP ratio, even though it has improved from 6% to about 9% over the last 3 years, is still one of the lowest in the world. This is symptomatic of our undue reliance on oil revenue, which has resulted in fiscal imbalances in our national financial landscape. We are clear about the overriding need to use taxation tools in achieving our objectives and delivery of our campaign promises for the greater good of the people of this great country, Nigeria.
The president recalled that the institute presented the communique of the 20th Annual Tax Conference held in 2018 to the government and proceeded to list steps taken by the government in response to the demands of conference delegates.
The communique from your conference held last year proffered the following recommendations, among others, to government. 1. Government was advised to redraft the tax laws and in particular to amend the areas of the company's income tax law that impose multiple taxation. 2. Government was advised to remove the minimum tax requirement that potentially forces loss-making companies to pay tax from capital. 3. Government was also advised to renegotiate tax treaties that conferred unwarranted advantages to other parties to treaty negotiations and agreements. And fourthly, government was advised to widen the tax base. In tandem with some of these recommendations, this administration revised the 2012 National Tax Policy document, which was approved by the Federal Executive Council in February of fiscal year 2017. The revised National Tax Policy has assisted in providing government with its policy trajectory. Furthermore, a committee to drive the implementation of the policy was set up and it has since commenced work. The work of the committee has resulted in 2 executive orders and 5 amendment bills, which will be exposed for relevant stakeholders' input and legislative action. For executive orders, we had firstly, Value Added Tax Act modification order, and secondly, Review of Goods Liable to Excise Duties and Applicable Rates Order 2017. For amendment bills, we have first, Companies Income Tax Act Amendment Bill, secondly, Value Added Tax Act Amendment Bill, thirdly, Customs Excise Tariff etc. Consolidation Act Amendment Bill, fourthly, Personal Income Tax Act Amendment Bill, and finally, the Industrial Development Income Tax Relief Act Amendment Bill.
In attendance at the conference was the Executive Chairman, Federal Inland Revenue Service, Mr. Babatunde Fowler. The FIRS got special commendation for its sterling performance in 2018.
We are happy with the result of our sustained efforts towards enhanced tax compliance in fiscal year 2018, which culminated in the Federal Inland Revenue Service announcement of a record collection of 5.32 trillion naira. This was achieved through sheer hard work and provision of the political will and support to that agency, among other relevant revenue collection agencies.
The CITN also came up for commendation.
Once again, let me acknowledge the numerous contributions of the Institute to national development, having played an active role in the committee that reviewed the National Tax Policy document and other tax reform bills. Your objective and well-informed comments to national fiscal discourse on ways of improving the fiscal space are quite acknowledged. Worthy of note is your updated Charter of Tax Demands, which I had the privilege of receiving from you very recently. We have taken note of your recommendations and would work towards finding a common ground for implementing them.
And discharge.
We encourage your institute to check any proven unethical and unprofessional practice by your members as a way of upholding the ethics of the profession in the tax system.
The theme of the 21st Annual Tax Conference was National Development, Unlocking the Potentials of Taxation. The theme paper was presented by Mr. Tony Elumelu, Chairman, Heirs Holding and founder, Tony Elumelu Foundation. Mr. Elumelu chose to look at the topic from the perspective of a private sector operator and small and medium enterprise owners.
So I want to bring a slightly different perspective to the conversation, more like representing the interests of the private sector as we see tax in the country today, vis-a-vis national development, and more importantly also representing the interests of the small and medium-scale enterprises, the young entrepreneurs that we at the Tony Elumelu Foundation are supporting. We can't talk about national development without addressing the small and medium-scale sector. That is the engine of every economy. Those are the people who create jobs. Those are the people who help to stabilize the economy. Our citizens demand good standard of living. They want to have good access to education. They want to have improved healthcare. They want to see massive improvement in infrastructure. They want accommodation. They want security. They want improvement in our moral values and standards as a country, and on and on and on. Government, on the other hand, needs revenue, money, to provide all of this. Education, healthcare, infrastructure, security, and on and on and on. So on one hand, the citizens want good life, and they deserve it. On the other hand, for government to provide this, government must have expanded revenue to do so. Unfortunately, the revenue earning sources for government is dwindling. We know, as also was said before, we largely for a long time depended on oil, and we know what is happening in that commodity space, and so many other areas that could do better. So demand is high, our expectations high. Government needs revenue, but that revenue is not growing. The population of Nigeria is growing, soon 200 million people in the country, and revenue is not growing to provide the social goods and other things. So it's a challenge for everyone. So the question becomes, how does government fund these demands, legitimate and expected desires and expectations of the citizenry? How does government fund it in the circumstance of dwindling oil revenue and other sources of earnings for government? One of the ways, therefore, is to make sure there's increase in revenue from taxation. So tax becomes relevant in this development case for human development index or indicators. So how do we achieve more revenue so that government can fulfill these expectations? This is what I hope that we'll be able to discuss in helping to enrich the good work that government already is doing. Because indeed, I was quite impressed to hear some of the things I've heard there. We also need to know why those executive bills have not been translated from executive bill to acts, legislation, piece of legislation that can now guide the country. So that if there's cohesion in citizenry expectations, in government desire and willingness to provide this, and the enablement to make all of this happen, then all things being equal, we should be better for it.
In 2018, a total of 5.320 trillion naira was collected as taxes by the Federal Inland Revenue Service (FIRS). This is the highest ever collected as federal taxes in Nigeria. Taxes have become an important source of revenue, enabling the government to provide greater infrastructural developments in our country. Tax revenues enable government to provide more roads, more railways, more bridges, more housing, more schools, more students in schools, more hospitals, more security, and generate more power. Because Nigeria deserves more. Only your taxes can make all our dreams come true. This message is from the Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS. It pays to pay your tax.
Welcome back. We're still at the 21st Annual Tax Conference organized by the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, CITN. Mr. Elumelu proceeded by making comparisons between Nigeria and Rwanda, an emerging economy on the African continent.
So I have some facts I'd like to share with us on this. Number one, Nigeria's tax to GDP ratio is approximately 6%. Our tax to GDP ratio. Rwanda, a much smaller country, the tax to GDP ratio is about 16%. The population of Nigeria, as I said before, is about 200 million. Rwanda, about 10 million. Nigeria is the largest economy in Africa. Our size of economy is about $400 billion. But tax to GDP is 6%. Rwanda, tax to GDP, 16%. So just imagine if we were able magically to get our tax to GDP ratio to become, say, like 10%. 10% of 400 billion is $40 billion. Our foreign reserve today as a country is about $44 billion. So we can imagine what we'll be talking about in terms of capacitizing government from revenue perspective to be able to fulfill those are legitimate desires and obligations. In 2019, World Bank Ease of Doing Business rating, out of the 10 business topics surveyed, paying taxes had a third worst score, with Nigeria ranking 157 out of 190. It was said that the number of taxes paid by an average company in Nigeria per year was 48 taxes by an average company in Nigeria in a year, compared to an average of 37 in sub-Saharan Africa, what companies in other sub-Saharan African countries pay, and just 3 in Hong Kong. With a population of close to 200 million in Nigeria, we have only 75,000 registered SMEs in the country. registered. With 200 million people in the country, we don't need anyone to tell us that people are dodging or don't want to be part of it. Can government fulfill its obligation to citizenry? Can government support or provide what they need to do in this scenario? No. But why, therefore, is it the case that only 75,000 people of SMEs are registered? That is a question also we need to interrogate if we must expand the tax base in this country. Otherwise, we'll be making the few ones that already go through the process, and there will be a limit that they cannot meet, and therefore revenue per se or tax to GDP will not grow. Payment of taxes by the citizenry is even good for good governance because they hold government and leadership more accountable. So it is all our collective interest to make sure that we expand the tax base for the obvious benefits of helping government generate more revenue, but more important, or equally important, for the purpose of making sure there's mass mobilization and interest and demand for good governance in the country. Where people don't pay tax is not their money. They don't care about what happens. And that is part, in my viewpoint, the kinds of issues and conclusions we should be coming up with here to see what is it that makes the average Nigerian think it's not wrong not to pay tax? Why is it that only 75,000 people in a country of 200 million SMEs pay tax or have registered businesses? How do we bring or formalize our informal economy, bring the informal economy to the formal system so that things can work? Why is it that corporations are moving the headquarters out of Nigeria? Why do people try to avoid taxation? Why are people not proud to pay taxes? Why is it that executive bill sent to National Assembly in 2017, this is 2019, why have they not been passed into law? Those members of National Assembly, don't they have constituents? Don't they have unemployment in their constituencies? Don't they know that these tax amendments will help sustain, create employment in the country? These are conversations we need to begin to take to the streets.
Mr. Elumelu's paper was discussed by Mr. Mark Anthony Dike, past president, CITN, and a retired director of the FIRS. On the slow pace of amendments to tax laws.
During the military regime, it was so easy to do. The Federal Inland Revenue Service, working in concert with the Supervisory Ministry, comes up with amendments to tax laws, fiscal provisions. And these things are sent, and they are really passed. Every year, there are fiscal provisions in the budget, and the Finance Miscellaneous Taxation Provision Decree comes out immediately after the head of state has announced the budget. How many? Since 1999. We are now 20 years. It was only in 2007 we had some amendment, and then in 2011, the amendment to personal income tax. But every time we're sharing money, appropriation cake, appropriating the cake. What about the ingredients for baking the cake?
The audience was also fully involved in the discussion.
I just wanted to draw attention to where it started from, comparing Nigeria with Rwanda in terms of tax revenue to GDP. We observed that Nigeria tax administration performance has largely been underreported, maybe because we are running a kind of unitary system. In Rwanda, for example, you have just one tax authority. In Nigeria, you have several tax authorities along with the federal inland revenue. And the statistics they always use the statistics for federal inland revenue. I give you just a close statistic. By the time we did the computation, including the revenue from the state revenue authorities, our tax revenue to GDP is above 9%, and it's growing. And if you take into account that where you uploaded the federal inland revenue to have generated 5.3 trillion, Last year alone, the other revenue authorities put together crossed the over 1 trillion revenue, 1.2 trillion all put together. So the computation that you've always had, that 6% was done in 2015, excluding states like Lagos and other states that generated revenue. In the meantime, the GDP that is used is for the entire country. For the tax revenue, they only use that of the federal revenue. And I think we have to look at these statistics. So to address this, in any case, the Joint Tax Board has started publication of a technical digest. We started last quarter. We have the one for the full year, and that gives you detailed information of what is happening in the Nigerian tax system. And we alluded to the population of 200 million. As at the time in 2015 when today Fowler came in, our total tax base, those who were in the tax net we recognized, was just 2 million that are documented. And today, we moved it to 20 million. But when you compare that to those who have bank accounts for over 40 million, you find out that those economically active people, they are not even in the tax net. So I want us to actually address all the points you've raised. They've all been articulated in the National Tax Policy document. If we're able to implement that document and monitor and coordinated action by the various stakeholders, I think we arrive at a favorable tax administration system that is inclusive and that is a winner for everybody. Thank you.
Mr. Ayodele Subar, Executive Chairman, Lagos State Internal Revenue Service, chaired the paper presentation session.
We have seen the connection between development and taxation.
The intellectual feast on day one also featured the kick-off of presentations on sub-themes. Dr. Biodun Adedipe, in his paper, compared Nigeria with other countries on several indices. The presentation session was chaired by past President CITN, Mr. Folusho Fashoto, while Mr. Edem Anda was the discussant. There were also panel sessions. Earlier in the day, the Conference Planning Committee Chairman, Mr. Kolawole Babarinde, welcomed conference participants, while President and Chairman in Council, Chief Cyril Ekemefuna Ede, delivered the opening speech.
The Annual Tax Conference is exclusively organized by the CITN as a platform for tax professionals to converge and discuss emerging issues in the field of taxation. I invite you to enjoy every moment. Prepare yourself to be challenged, excited, and inspired.
The theme of this year's conference, which is National Development, Unlocking the Potentials of Taxation, is born out of the desire of CITN to advance taxation as an essential tool for promoting macroeconomic goals of achieving full employment, income redistribution, competitive environment for businesses, among others.
The event lasted for 4 days, 4 exciting days. There was no dull moment. Intellectual discussions, networking, games and sports, national quiz competition, and of course the grand finale, the gala night.
Yes, boogie time. In the meantime, conference delegates have begun to speak on their experience at the 21st Annual Tax Conference.
It's my first attendance and it's been a wonderful meeting. I've been sharing my experiences with my colleagues since yesterday I came in, and an eye-opener to so many things.
What has been your takeaway so far?
Basically, it's been on how to improve tax system in Nigeria. We'll be talking about unlocking the potentials of taxation. Taxation is a very strong instrument that we can use to generate revenue. Over the years, we've depended on oil, but now we need to look somewhere else, which is taxation. All over the world, taxation has been seen as, the focal of generating revenue. It's a compulsory levy. We see it as our duty to pay tax. Even as an employee of government with FRS, I pay my tax. But the issue is unlocking the potentials of taxation. I think we should bring in so many of the canons of taxation. We can add to the canons of taxation by adding transparency, accountability. It will help to encourage the taxpayers when they see what their money is being used for.
So you see, we have only served you the appetizer and only a few items on the menu. Next week, we will serve you more on the menu and of course the desserts.
We are sure you cannot wait. So join us next week on this same station, same day of the week, same time of the day.
Bye for now.